Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Prime Crime. This is a young mom washes up on shore near Florida Navel.
Well, we think we found a dead body. A young single mom with a bright future ahead. She was trying to make a life for her son. She was attending college to be a dental assistant.
Samira met Zachary, a military member she fell head over heels for.
But when she turns up missing, it triggers a real life NCIS investigation.
Yeah, I feel like I had the motive to do something to her, but I didn't do nothing to that girl. I don't know what she had.
Did you ever hear William say anything during this time about being upset with Samira or wanting to do her any kind of harm?
Hey everybody, I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime, where we break down the most compelling and memorable true crime cases from across the country. When 25-year-old Samira Watkins vanishes near a Florida naval base, police have some suspects. But tying one of them to the crime is tougher than anyone expected.
911, we're in an emergency.
It's like a non-emergency. Who wants like part of this?
Who is she?
It's my sister.
And what is her name?
Samira Watts.
When's the last place you saw her?
Last place I seen her was on Thursday night around 8 o'clock.
One of our officers responded to a call of a missing person. That officer realized that the circumstances of the incident seemed quite a bit fishy and contacted me with a need for an investigation to start immediately.
Saturday, October 31st, 2009, Pensacola, Florida. Police Detective Jonathan Thacker interviews 911 caller Sylvia Watkins, whose older sister Samira has gone missing.
Tell me from the very beginning, everything that has happened that made you concerned about your sister's well-being.
Thursday night, when she got off of work, she came home and she was getting dressed to go to his house.
On the night of October 29th, Samira had completed her shift at a local McDonald's restaurant where she was the manager. After that, she came home, changed her clothes, and indicated that she was heading out to meet her boyfriend, Zachary Littleton. Littleton was a 24-year-old member of the United States Navy. He was stationed at the Pensacola Naval Air Station.
She was very excited about this guy she met who was in the military. She was looking forward to a future with him.
She asked me to drop her off, but I was too tired. I was already in bed asleep. And after that, I guess that's when she left.
So it's around 9 o'clock in the evening. All right, so she drove herself over, and we don't really know where she went. We know that she was saying that she was going to go to his house. Is that last time that you heard her?
Heard from, yeah.
Samira Watkins was a 25-year-old single mom. She was the oldest of 5 children in her family. She had a child of her own, a little boy at 4 years old. She was a manager at a local fast food restaurant, and she was going to college to be a dental assistant. Did she ever say anything to you that would make you think that she would just need to get away? Is this kind of her character? She's never made any comments like, I just got to get away from things, or... Okay.
When she didn't arrive home, her family and friends were very concerned.
When did you start calling her?
I started calling her that morning. That next morning.
Early morning?
All throughout the day, I've been calling her like.
And initially, it would ring and then go to voicemail. And I understand that now it doesn't even ring; it just goes to voicemail.
Mm-hmm.
When she stopped responding to the family, when they couldn't reach her the next day, her sister went to look for her at Zachary's home. That's when she got a real surprise.
About 12 when out there, me and my cousin went out there. And that's when we knocked on the door, we didn't get no answer, so we knocked on the neighbor's door. And that's when she told us that he was loading the couch on the truck and said that he was moving because he needed a bigger place for his wife and kids.
It was shocking because Zachary Littleton was leading a double life. He was married. He had a child. They told Samira his name was Ricky. He was not who he said he was.
What we learned is that his wife was also in the Navy and was scheduled to actually move to Pensacola from South Carolina, where she was stationed, in the next week.
But there's another twist to Samira's story.
She found out she was pregnant probably like a month ago. And she told him, and he was saying that he didn't want any more kids. He's married. He's not supposed to go outside of his relationship.
And what is his reaction?
He wanted her to get a divorce.
Tell me about the things that she told you about him.
Okay. First, everything was cool or whatever. She liked him or whatever. Then, when she found out she was pregnant, he was saying, like, get an abortion or punching his stomach, and I ain't got nothing to do with you. It was kind of scary for me.
Fearing the worst, Pensacola police contact Florida State Prosecutor Bridget Myers Jensen.
I became involved early on in the case because there was such an unusual and suspicious circumstance. Zachary Littleton was initially a suspect, and probably the strongest suspect, because he found out that Samira was pregnant and he was not happy about the pregnancy. He was also the last person that we knew Samira had been with the night that she went missing.
So Detective Thacker gives Littleton a call.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, it's Ricky. It's
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's going on?
He very quickly indicated that he wasn't Ricky, he was Zach. And that was odd. There'd be a different name given by the family as to what this actual person's telling him.
Hey, do you know this young lady, Samira? Samira, yeah, she said Sammy. That's what she told me, kind of Sammy.
He, in fact, didn't even recognize her name at first when he was asked. They said, do you know a Samira? And his response was, Samira, Sammy. She called herself Sammy, as if this was a person he had just met.
Do you know where she is now? No, I don't. Okay. All right. Look, here's the deal. She has been reported missing, okay? And at this point, we're investigating her whereabouts. So I need to talk to you, and not over the phone.
It was obviously important to see what he knew. He was essentially could have been the last person to see Samira alive. So I asked him to come down for an interview.
Okay, all right. You'll have to see here. You work for the Navy, right? Right. And it's police department. Okay, so you're like are you like a military police? Okay.
Hearing that Zachary Littleton was a military police officer, part of me thought, well, certainly a police officer in the military wouldn't hurt somebody or cause them to go missing. I want to hear his explanation for why she's missing and what all he knew.
So you've known her for how long? And if she went now a whole year. When was the last time that you saw Sammy? Last time I seen her was Wednesday when I dropped off at home. Have you seen her any time since when you dropped her off? No, I haven't.
He indicated that he had never seen Samira on the night of her disappearance, on the 29th. And that was odd because she was supposedly going to his house.
Did you have any kind of a relationship with Sammy that was more than just friends? No.
So he was clearly not faithful to his wife, but he had to keep that a secret because under military rules, you can get disciplined if you commit adultery.
I want you to know that I'm not the military. I want you to feel free to tell me everything without you worrying about getting in trouble. Okay, we had sex once or twice. You know, it wasn't really a relationship. It was just friends. It was not. So maybe I did some things, I said some things that probably made her believe that we was in a relationship, but I didn't see it that way.
When Samira met Zachary, she saw a military member who was very handsome and seemed to have his head on his shoulders and was charming and someone that she fell head over heels for and wanted to build a future with.
Sometimes the kids just staring at me and just, looking at me like she just admired by me so much. That's why I'm like, no, man, we can't be new to begin that you want to be the one in my life.
When investigators asked him about his feelings, Zachary acted cavalier towards a relationship with Samira. Yeah, this was just a fling.
Was she depressed acting or anything? Yeah, she just kind of had a sad tone to her. But she like, we need to talk. Was the conversation centered around her thinking that she was pregnant with your child? No, it's more centered around why we can't spend time together. Was she pregnant? I don't know. Because she never came to you and said, this is your baby. She never actually came out and said that. She was like, the baby's going to be born. Well, the issue really was pregnant. Were you at all concerned? Well, it'd be mine. Right. Yeah.
He didn't want any part of this child. He didn't want any serious relationship with Samira. After all, he was married, living a double life. He already had a child. So he tried to encourage Samira to get an abortion.
And that was something that Samira did not want to do. She wanted to have the baby.
When I asked Littleton about his alibi, for lack of better words, on the night of the 29th, he basically said he was at home all night, that he was moving.
Days I work, and then night I was boxing up and cleaning up stuff. Well, I ain't really cleaning up, just boxing up my belongings and stuff. But my wife and my daughter, they'll be here and Friday. But see,
he was living in an apartment at that time here in Pensacola, and with his wife and his child being stationed within a week here in Pensacola, they had made a decision to leave the apartment and move into a home.
They'll be here, and we need the apartment just one big enough a family, so we bring the house here up.
So he said that night he was packing all night into the wee hours of the morning, getting all the stuff put in boxes and things like that, so that he could begin to move the next day.
Where do you think she is? I don't know. I mean, I didn't do anything. I'm not responsible for her being here. That's why we get. You want to know if I'm responsible for her being here?
Zachary Littleton seemed a little flippant and not concerned whatsoever as to where Samira may be.
Clearly, Littleton doesn't want the affair to come out, but that on its face doesn't mean he's involved in Samira's disappearance, especially since there's another development.
Once Littleton had moved out of his apartment, and we were able to go and search the apartment to see what was left behind, if there was a crime scene somewhere in the apartment. We didn't find anything of obvious concern. We didn't find blood. We didn't find where an obvious struggle had occurred. We didn't feel like it would be prudent to focus solely on him. We began to research Samira's past. And what we learned is that Samira had a boyfriend who had just gotten out of prison, actually, a guy by the name of William Peters.
William Peters was the father of Samira's 4-year-old child. They had had a very tumultuous relationship, both physically and mentally. Mr. Peters was abusive to Samira. At the time that Samira went missing, she did have a restraining order against her child's father, William Peters.
So he was someone who was dealing with, obviously, anger management issues, who had some feelings for Samira that were so intense that he committed crimes. And so now Samira goes missing. That's a big break for law enforcement.
Could the father of Samira's 4-year-old son have had something to do with her disappearance? Up next, Detective Thacker pays a visit to William Peters' family.
Did you ever hear William say anything during this time about being upset with Samira or wanting to do her any kind of harm? You're aware that she was last seen on October the 29th, 2009. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. On that date, do you remember much about that evening?
Well, I know I hadn't seen her that day, and I had been here all day. She supposed to have came by to drop on her, but never did show up.
Days after Samira Watkins was last seen alive, Pensacola Police Sergeant Jonathan Thacker interviews Linda Nobles. Linda is the mother of Samira's ex, William Peters, and the grandma of Peters and Samira's young son.
William Peters had done time for actually battering Samira Watkins. When William got out of jail, it was a short time before Samira went missing. So that was another thing that was a red flag for us, that perhaps William Peters was responsible for Samira going missing. I did go to his house. I interviewed his family.
All right, so she was supposed to come by to drop off her child for you to watch him?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever find out why it is that she didn't?
I never heard from her.
He had a violent past, and he was free, and they wanted to establish whether he had a real alibi.
Let's talk about William for a minute, okay? William has a job, yes?
Yes.
Or no?
Yes.
He does have a job. What is his job?
He worked with my daughter.
Okay, what kind of work do they do?
They do sanitary cleaning.
Okay. So they clean office buildings?
Yes, they do.
Right after getting out of jail, he began to work cleaning in the middle of the night. So him and his crew would go to companies, businesses, and do cleaning for them.
So by 11 p.m. on the 29th, he was getting home?
Yes.
Okay. Once he got home, what did he do?
Okay, he came home, spoke to me, asked me did I plug up the fryer so he can cook him something to eat. He went straight in the back and started cooking him something to eat. And after that, he started watching TV.
On this evening of the 29th, and also we're talking about the 30th in the morning, did William ever leave the home?
No, he did not.
On the night of the October 29th, I was able to verify that William Peters was actually on a crew that night cleaning, and I had his alibi pretty well secured at that point.
And therefore he was ruled out as a suspect.
And there was something else that convinced investigators that William Peters wasn't their man.
When William Peters was notified that Samira was missing, he was very upset and obviously concerned for her safety as well as her whereabouts.
He was upset for his child, the child they had in common, knowing that, if she's not found, then, his son could be without a mother. So he was showing genuine concern for Samira's well-being, in stark contrast to Zachary Littleton, who really didn't show much concern at all.
Detective Thacker turns his attention back to Zachary Littleton, the man who was secretly having an affair with Samira and caused her to be pregnant. Thacker brings Littleton in for another interview.
Did your wife know that you were talking to this girl? No. Would that be a problem if she knew that? No, because she knows I have a lot of friends. And she don't know about them. She don't know their name, but she know I talk to other girls.
During the course of the interview with Littleton, we talked to him about his cell phones, and he indicated that he had at least 2 cell phones. And he wasn't really shy as the interview progressed. He wasn't shy to indicate to us that one of those phones was kind of for the girls to call him on.
Zachary was known on the base as a player, a playboy, someone who had multiple relationships. In fact, later on when he was talking to police, he said that Samira was just one of many extramarital relationships he had.
What I learned was that the phone was we call it a burner phone. Zachary Littleton was using the burner phone to call Samira. And it was the kind of phone that you get at maybe a convenience store. You take it home, you register it online or over the phone, and you don't have to give a lot of information to the companies that service those phones.
I had 2 cell phones. I had a Boost mobile phone. And she used to call me on, I cut that phone off. The first one, she used to call you on that. Mm-hmm. You want to shut it off again? Because I was getting text messages and didn't want to have nobody calling me, harassing me about anything. So I cut it off.
And hearing that just kind of started to build understanding of the kind of person that Littleton was.
Zachary had a cavalier attitude towards the relationship and the child. In reality, it was always about him.
As Littleton talks about Samira, something strikes the detective as odd.
I'm trying to recreate this young lady in my mind. I don't know her. And if I can recreate her and kind of get in her head, I'm going to find out where she's at, what her demeanor was like. She was a real calm girl. She wasn't no fighting type or no. Yeah. She was real, just calm, and I ain't gonna say she was nice. She was that She had good tendencies to be a good woman. I put it right there.
He used her name in the past tense a lot when he would refer to her, which at that time it was a missing person. Missing persons often are found alive and perfectly fine. In fact, they usually are. And he was already referring to her in the past tense.
What do you think happened with her? You know, where's she at now? I don't know. I guess she's on the way to my house. Hey, what do you think of? I hope she's okay. I understand that, but what do you think? What do you think? Yeah, I feel like I had the motive to do something to her, but I didn't do nothing to that girl. I don't know where she at. She didn't come to my house Thursday, so.
Zachary Littleton was stonewalling investigators. She was pregnant, and he was trying to protect his family and his career. Under military rules, adultery is an offense. You get sanctioned for that. Plus, he's married with a child, and so you can see why a child with his mistress could complicate things at home and at work.
Detective Thacker has hit a dead end with Zachary Littleton. But the very next day, 4 days after Samira disappeared, there's a major turn of events.
Sure, so I don't know what you want to say.
What's the name for it?
Okay, what's her name point?
We think we found a dead body. It's in a bag, a big old like a big old like bag you carry on a train. Looks like it has blood over it. Has a big old rock on it. It's up deep. It's real heavy.
On Tuesday, November 3rd, I was notified that a duffel bag had been located, washed ashore in a local body of water right across from the Pensacola Naval Air Station. The people that found it, which were jet skiers, were concerned enough to call law enforcement.
When they discovered the black duffel bag, there was a very foul odor coming from it, and it obviously appeared to be suspicious.
So inside of this bag, in the fetal position, was the body of a black female. It would end up being Samira Watkins. She had duct tape wrapped from her chin up to just below her eyeballs, all the way around her head. She was clothed only in a bra. She was otherwise nude. Inside of the bag, there was a Clorox wipe that was kind of balled up in the bottom of the bag, and there was also a paper towel.
A fingerprint analysis is performed on site and confirms the body is Samira's.
And this would be the break that law enforcement needed in this case. Upon finding the body in the duffel bag, this case transformed from a missing persons case to a homicide.
The medical examiner ruled that Samira had been asphyxiated and that that she was suffocated. My theory was that she was likely strangled by whoever killed her.
The autopsy also reveals what could be an important clue.
When the autopsy was done on Samira, the medical examiner removed the duct tape from around her face and around her head, around her ears, and it was noticed at that point that she was only wearing one of her gold hoop earrings. And the reason this was so significant is because these earrings were so sentimental to her, and according to her family members, she wore them all the time.
Surveillance footage from the fast food restaurant where Samira was working the night she was last seen showed her wearing both earrings.
And she only had one. The other one had fallen off at some point. And I surmised that she probably lost that earring during some kind of an altercation, and it probably dropped at or near the place where she was assaulted and then later killed.
So whoever had the other hoop earrings was going to be the main suspect in her death.
Investigators strongly suspect that person was Zachary Littleton. However, they still have no direct evidence connecting him to the crime, so they call in the big guns, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the NCIS.
So being that our suspect was a member of the United States Navy, Zachary Littleton, and we knew that a lot of our witnesses, the friends that Zachary had, were also members of the Navy. We reached out to NCIS to help us out. They'd be able to help facilitate interviews, perhaps records of things that went on. So I worked closely with NCIS during the investigation.
Coming up, Detective Thacker interviews Zachary Littleton's friends. Will they lead to a breakthrough?
What do you think? Based on what you've heard and what we've disclosed, what do you think is the most reasonable?
Maybe mama dropped mommy. You know, he got her pregnant. I know he's married with another job, and I know she's coming down soon.
Hey everybody, we're going to get right back to the Samira Watkins case in a minute, but before we do, I want to call out one of the sponsors of this episode of Prime Crime, Truth Finder. So in a world where we have to ask, how well do we really know the people in our lives? Truth Finder is a service that can maybe provide you some answers because it's one of the largest public records search services in the United States. You go on the website, truthfinder.com, you type in a name, and within minutes of a paid subscription purchase, you can access unlimited reports that can include information like phone numbers, location history, criminal and traffic records, including possible arrests, criminal convictions. Also, if you type in an address within a report, it can show you registered sex offenders in an area, which is honestly just kind of wild to see. So whether it's researching new dates or friends or reconnecting with people, Truth Finder is a great tool. And right now you can get 50% off of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LCPrimeCrime.
You're a policeman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
With those circumstances, what does that lead you to believe that?
All eyes point on everything's pointing to him.
Early November 2009, just days after Samira Watkins' murder, investigators try a new tack to find out who killed her and dumped her body near the Pensacola Naval Air Station in Florida. Could it be Navy police officer Zachary Littleton, the man who was having a secret affair with Samira? Police interview Littleton's friends and colleagues.
Did you work on Thursday? Yes, last Thursday. Yes, I did. When did you next hear Littleton? Oh, in the parking lot. When? That evening, after we downloaded, because we were making plans for me to go over the next morning and help him move from his apartment to his new house.
All right, so is the parking lot that he approached you about helping him move?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. And what time was that?
About 10:15-ish, maybe. I mean, at the latest.
Zachary Littleton was at work at the base earlier in the evening that he left his job. He drove directly up to his house, and he's arriving at his house just before Samira would also arrive at his house.
Littleton followed up with his friend the next day, the morning after Samira was last seen.
That morning, he texted me about 7-something in the morning, and I was still sleeping. And I woke up at about 8:30-ish. He said he'd be here by 9, but I couldn't get there until 9:15.
All right, so you guys arrived at his house, and what happened at his house?
We were sitting there. We basically made up like a game plan on how we want to start moving everything, and he backed the truck up, and then we started taking the furniture down.
Surely he has other things, knick-knack things, clothing.
Yes. So I asked him, I was like, "Why isn't your clothes packed?" And he said, "I don't have luggage." And he pulled all his drawers out, and he just set them on the side, and we didn't move those out. But when I left, they were still in his bedroom.
While Zach was supposed to be ready, he wasn't. So that kind of messed up his alibi even further, that he was indicating to us that he was at home packing all night, when in reality, nothing was done.
If that seems suspicious, what Littleton did earlier that same morning really raised detectives' eyebrows.
We did have a friend come forward that said that on the morning of October 30th, so we're talking about the morning after Samira's disappearance, Zach comes to her house at 5 a.m., so very early, and he's asking if he can do his laundry over at her house.
Is it usual for everyone to come to your house at 4 and 5 in the morning? Did that strike you as odd?
Yeah, but he said he just been packing all night.
Didn't make us feel like he was probably doing that to destroy some sort of evidence or to wash away blood or something along those lines.
Littleton's supervisor raises more suspicions about the night Samira went missing.
Is there anything you can think of that might have been permanent? Anything we should know about that you might recall that might be important?
Me being his mentor, I asked him, is he okay? And he said one thing. He said that, yes, she came over and asked to stay over. And I told her, I don't want her to come over here. So I took her home. And I said, took her home? Like, if he took her home, what happened to a car or stuff like that?
What night was he saying that was?
Thursday.
That statement directly contradicts what Littleton's been saying, that he last saw Samira on Wednesday. Now, investigators start to put the pieces together.
The theory that I have is that Samira made it to Zachary's apartment, and whoever killed her or put her in the bag likely used her own car to transport her body to that waterway.
And it seems Detective Thacker was right on the money.
It was several days later that we had a neighbor contact the police to say that they had located a red Ford Taurus. Now, that Taurus was parked in a driveway, and it had been there for several days. So when we got there, we found that it was indeed Samira's car. My theory was that after dumping her body, Zachary Littleton also dumped the car and left it there in that driveway.
Law enforcement found Zachary Littleton's DNA on the steering wheel of Samira Watkins' car. He had mentioned in one of his interviews that he had never been in her car, much less driven it, so that was obviously very important.
On November 6th, we conducted a search warrant at Zachary Littleton's home. Now, keep in mind, we believed that when the murder occurred, he was living at the apartment. We had looked in the apartment, found that there was nothing there of value, but we also knew that a lot of the evidence he could have very easily moved with him, either knowingly or inadvertently.
When law enforcement was going through the different areas of his house, inside of one of the bedrooms were some paper towels that had a pattern that were consistent with the paper towels that were found inside the duffel bag. And there was also a can of Clorox wipes that were consistent with a wipe that was found in the duffel bag.
The number one most valuable item that we found, the thing that was the best piece of evidence, was the earring. An earring that matched exactly the earring that Samira Watkins had.
There were a lot of pieces of evidence that were important to the case, but certainly the gold earring was a smoking gun.
Now, investigators have the best idea so far of what happened to Samira Watkins.
Our theory of the case was that Samira went to go see Zachary Littleton the night of October 29th, 2009. At some point while she was at his apartment, a neighbor saw and heard Zachary and Samira arguing. We believe that same night, Samira was suffocated or smothered or somehow asphyxiated inside of Zachary Littleton's apartment. He then wrapped duct tape around her face. He placed her naked body in a duffel bag. He took the duffel bag from his apartment and put it in the trunk of her car. He then drove to the other side of town and threw her body into the bayou.
In order to confirm their theory, local authorities need cold, hard evidence, so they reach out to the NCIS.
One of the things that NCIS helped us out with is that there was new technology at the time for cell phone mapping, specifically cell phone tower mapping. I knew I'd be able to get the tower hits from the phone provider, but the mapping would have been made a lot easier if NCIS was involved. So when I pulled Samira's phone records in the months leading up to her death, I did see where she was talking to Littleton pretty regularly. But then there came a point where that stopped, but then a mystery number came about. I think that when he decided he was going to kill Samira, is when he decided to cut ties with her from his regular phone and start using the burner phone without supposedly us finding out. And on the day of her disappearance, that number called her a total of 11 times. It was the main number calling her, quite frankly.
NCIS was able to determine where their cell phones were pinging onto the nearby cell phone towers. And with that information, we were able to track the two of them who were traveling together, and also put holes in Zachary Littleton's story about moving and not seeing Samira.
We could see plain as day where Samira was at work at her fast food job, that she left, that she came down to where she lives, which is pretty much across town. She's there for a little while, and the next thing you know, you see her heading back up to the area where Zachary Littleton lived. And it actually showed she made it to his house, despite him saying earlier in our interviews that she never arrived. And instead of him being at home all night and packing like he told us, we see him actually leaving his house by way of the tower hits and headed back toward the base.
The cell phone data seems to show that Littleton was heading for the spot where Samira's body was found. But one question remains.
How did Littleton get home when Samira's car was found 10 miles away?
The location where we found Samira's car was clear across town, roughly 10 miles away. It didn't seem feasible that Zachary Littleton was able to just walk home. So we played around with the idea, did he have somebody that helped him? Did he have a friend come pick him up?
Back then, Ubers weren't a big thing, and there's only one way you can do it, and that is taxi cab. And so law enforcement called all the taxi cab companies, and bingo, they found the cab that Zachary Littleton was traveling in on his way back from killing Samira.
Zach had ordered a cab from a Waffle House that was about a mile from where Samira's car was left. They went to that location and got video surveillance and were able to find Zachary Littleton inside the Waffle House at approximately 4:20 a.m. with a can of Clorox wipes.
He walks into the restaurant and actually asks to borrow their phone. They allowed him to do it, and he talks on the phone for a very short amount of time and hands the phone back to the employee, and he goes outside where at some point within a short period of time, a cab comes and drives him away.
There is a point on the video surveillance where Zachary Littleton looks directly into one of the cameras that was inside of the Waffle House.
This guy is not as smart as he thought he was. He was caught on camera, not only on camera, but looking directly into the camera at the Waffle House, where he was calling for the taxi. Not only calling for the taxi, but doing so while holding a tub of Clorox wipes, something that's used to clean up blood and other incriminating evidence. Littleton's goose was cooked once he was caught on camera, once the taxi cab records came through, and once the body was found.
So even before the video at the restaurant, I knew Zachary Littleton was likely going to be our suspect, but that was like putting some level of icing on the cake. I felt very confident then that we would be able to make the arrest.
On November 23rd, less than a month after Samira's murder, police arrest Zachary Littleton.
Zachary Littleton was indicted for first-degree premeditated murder, and that was the charge that I went to trial on.
When we return, despite all the evidence, getting a conviction is not going to be as easy as you might think.
My biggest concern going to trial on this particular case was because it was 100% circumstantial. I really didn't have an eyewitness. I didn't have forensics that directly linked Zachary Littleton to the homicide. I didn't have video surveillance of the homicide itself. So my concern was that it was just so circumstantial.
Hey everybody, we're going to get you right back to the Samira Watkins episode in just a minute. But before we do, I want to call out one of our great sponsors of Prime Crime, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should find yourself in that position where you're hurt and you need legal representation, Morgan & Morgan may be who you want in your corner because they're specialists in this area. And you know why they're so big? Because they win a lot. Verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions across this country. Yeah, and they don't settle for lowball offers. They also make the process so easy for their clients because from starting your claim to uploading documents to signing contracts and talking to your legal team, it can all be done from your smartphone. Also, there's no upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/primecrime.
When I have a case like this, I look at all the possibilities. Right. Okay? If you're responsible not to, it's possible that you killed her. Right.
June 27th, 2011, Escambia County, Florida. Almost 2 years after Samira Watkins' murder, Zachary Littleton's trial begins.
My strategy going into the trial was to create a timeline that went from the beginning of summer when Zachary and Samira first met into November when her body was discovered and the earring was found in his house. And then in between that timeline, trying to plug in pieces of evidence that would create a clear picture of Zachary Littleton's guilt.
The defense relies on the lack of direct physical evidence.
A challenge for prosecutors was that there wasn't clear blood or DNA evidence linking Littleton to the murder. And prosecutors had to still put the pieces of the puzzle together.
And Littleton chooses not to take the stand.
So although the jury doesn't hear him testify on the stand, they saw him in the police interviews being a sociopathic liar.
Was she saying that it was your baby? She had never said it was my baby.
All those lies showed consciousness of guilt, show what kind of person he is, and made it clear to the jury this was someone who you could not trust.
Zachary Littleton's demeanor during the course of his trial was confident and almost borderline arrogant. He seemed to be more concerned about what he was wearing and how he looked, as opposed to the evidence that the state was presenting against him.
Prosecutors had a really good case. They had the gold hearing. That's as close to a smoking gun as you can get in this case. That's direct evidence that he was the one who committed this heinous crime. How did the other gold hoop earring get into Zachary Littleton's apartment unless he was the one who killed her?
And then, of course, the cell tower records that showed the location of Zachary Littleton and Samira the night she went missing, because it put them in the exact same area.
And prosecutors have another weapon in their arsenal.
Some of the most important pieces of evidence to show the jurors were some searches on Zachary Littleton's computer.
These searches included how long does it take for a body to decompose. He was looking at searches related to putting a body in a landfill, how to cause a person to have an abortion. Does drinking vinegar cause an abortion? He was Googling abortion locations within our city.
Those searches then turned into how to speed up human decomposition, and then they led into how to pass a polygraph. So his searches were obviously key in the time frame of, beginning when she was pregnant, to then wanting to cause a miscarriage, to then when he was being interrogated by law enforcement.
That is so bad for the jury. There is no way to explain it other than you just killed your girlfriend and you're trying to ensure that you don't get caught. They had this guy dead to rights. You don't have to have too much direct evidence when you have this mountain of circumstantial evidence.
3 days later, on June 30th, the jury begins deliberations, and they reach a verdict quickly.
It only took the jury 3 hours to reach a verdict in this case. Once the evidence was presented and the timeline was proven and the alibi was discounted that he tried to provide, I think it was very clear to the jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that he was in fact the person that murdered Samira Watkins.
The jury finds Zachary Littleton guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
Jurors clearly had a visceral reaction to Zachary Littleton. Zachary seemed to use his position, his power, for nefarious means by gaining the confidence of Samira to make her believe that he was someone who he was not. But it's also someone who the jury would hate. A liar, a cheat, and a killer.
Zachary Littleton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I believe that justice was served for Samira Watkins, for her unborn child, for her 4-year-old little boy, and for the rest of her family members that loved her so much.
He'll be in prison for a very long time. He was 24 years old when this happened, and he's got a lot of life left where he'll have to do it behind bars.
How would you categorize her mental state? Did she change when the revelation occurred that she was pregnant? I think she was okay mentally. She used to send me like some crazy text messages, like why I didn't speak to her in a couple of days. And I had to call her, man, what's wrong with you?
So I believe that Zach Littleton made the decision to murder Samira because he was desperate. He had a couple different things working against him. One of them, being in the military, it's against their code of conduct to commit adultery. He would have likely lost rank if they had found out that he had been having affairs, that he had gotten somebody pregnant that wasn't his wife. He would have been in trouble for that. He also had working against him the fact that his wife, she had found out in the past that he had done things like this, and that she had given him an ultimatum that if you did that again, we're not going to stay together.
This case was obviously so tragic because it involved such a young, beautiful, vivacious mother of a small child that was really just trying to make the best life that she could, that was trying to do something with herself. And then to have that taken away at such a young age for such a senseless reason.
A trail of lies and deceit ends with the death of a young woman who only tried to make a better life for herself and her little boy. Instead, Samira Watkins' son is left without a mother, and her tight-knit family has lost their beloved older sister. That's all we have for you here on this episode of Prime Crime. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jesse Weber, and as always, stay safe.
Little small town Niles has this brutal, savage murder. There are kids that grew up locking their doors and being scared when they went to bed at night just because of this case.
Roxanne Wood in 1987 was married to Terry Wood. Roxanne and Terry went to the bowling alley and arrived in separate cars. Roxanne left earlier than Terry. He just wanted to keep with the fun he was having, and Roxanne wanted to get home and go to bed. Terry arrives home and notices Roxanne laying in the kitchen. He notices a pool of blood on the floor. She was bleeding profusely from her neck.
My wife has been murdered. My wife has been murdered.
I answered the phone, and I could tell something was bad wrong. He just broke down. He just said, "Someone murdered your sister." Rock being the rock of the family, she didn't have an enemy out there who just randomly breaks in and does this to someone.
She was sexually assaulted. The assailant left his DNA.
But in terms of the essential evidence, based on what was there, this went cold fairly quickly, did it not?
Based off of what they had to go on, yeah, the DNA technology wasn't there to follow up and go through on, and there was absolutely not a lot more to go off.
How frustrating was it that no one had been arrested?
Yeah, beyond frustrating.
I was starting to lose hope. Dr. Ashland Kirsten and I had been talking about involving the students at Western in a cold case project.
When we first got the file, it was just an amazing amount of data. It just looked overwhelming. Some of the documents are older than I am. Then we'd have to sort through if it was relevant information or not. Hours upon hours to scan all this stuff.
They were able to organize that report where we were able to put a keyword in and search across that entire document, 3,500 pages.
How important was that?
Hugely important.
I was hopeful that we would be able to solve the case or move the case forward, or that someone who came after us would.
The first thing that I did was I requested access to the case file. It was very easy to read through quite quickly due to the work of the students.
Gabriela Vargas is a genetic genealogist, probably one of the best in the country, if not the world.
But I'm also a pink-haired, tattooed mom from California who enjoys woodworking and gardening.
Describe the size of the DNA material that you had to work with.
It was 28 picograms, so small that you could never see it with the naked eye.
Just a speck of a speck of a speck.
Very, very, very small amount of DNA. It was deemed unsolvable prior to my involvement. Roxanne Wood's family was my motivation for working as hard and as fast as I did. They never gave up hope that one day justice would be served. They have a Facebook page. Janet Wood had made a post on the page, "One day, Rock, one day," and I screamed out at the top of my lungs, "No, today's your day, Rock, today's your day."